There's a quiet terror in realizing that the world you inhabit isn't your own. The slow creep of this awareness doesn't come with loud noises or flashing lights. It comes in the form of the mundane, derives as you wash your hands, as you tie your shoes, or when you stir your coffee. It's the sensation that something is off, like you're living someone else's life, but you're not sure how to prove it. How do you explain something so intangible? I didn't believe in ghosts, but I felt like one. It started small, the feeling of being observed. At first, it was just a passing thought. A little unsettling, yes, but nothing I couldn't brush off. I'd catch a glimpse of myself in a window or see my reflection in the screen of my phone and wonder, when did I stop feeling like the person in that reflection? The first night it happened, I woke up with the sensation of someone's gaze, fixed on me. It wasn't the usual feeling of waking up in the middle of the night, when your eyes adjust to the dark and you know you're alone. No, this was different. I was being watched not just by anyone, but by myself. I could almost feel my own eyes scanning me, taking in the way my chest moved as I breathed, the subtle shift in my body as I shifted in bed. I didn't move. I just lay there, paralyzed. The longer I lay still, the more I felt it. Someone or something was standing in the corner of my room, silently observing me. But when I turned to check, there was nothing there. I tried to brush it off as a dream. But when morning came, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had happened, something that was real, but I couldn't put into words. I should have dismissed it, moved on with my day, but I couldn't. That small seed of discomfort had been planted in my mind, and it sprouted quickly. As days passed, I started noticing more oddities tales I hadn't considered before. At work, I'd catch myself zoning out, only to look up and find that my colleagues were staring at me. They weren't looking at me with interest, but with the faintest hint of recognition, like they had seen me before, or knew something about me I didn't. I couldn't figure out what it was, but the looks they gave me weren't casual. They were too knowing, like they were watching me. The strange sensation of being observed continued to follow me, and it deepened, like an itch I couldn't scratch. It wasn't just when I was awake, it happened when I slept too. That's when the dream started. I don't remember the exact moment it began, but it was subtle at first. I didn't notice it for a while. At first, I just had the usual kind of dreams. Mundane, disjointed fragments that slipped through my consciousness as I slept. But then it changed. I had a dream where I was at a coffee shop talking to a woman I didn't recognize. She was sitting across from me, smiling warmly, but there was something about her smile that made my skin crawl. She looked like someone I knew, but couldn't place. I was saying something, laughing about something, but I wasn't the one laughing. The laughter came from the person across from me. That's when I realized I wasn't the one in control. I wasn't even me in the dream. I was someone else, watching myself from a distance. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I just had to watch as the woman in the dream kept talking, her voice rising and falling while I remained paralyzed. The worst part was when I noticed that I wasn't alone in the dream. I was being watched by me. The version of me sitting across from the woman was different. His eyes were colder, his smile more rehearsed. It wasn't like I was seeing myself in a reflection. It was like I was seeing a ghost of myself, someone wearing my face, my body, but moving differently, like a puppet with tangled strings. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. For a second, I thought the dream had followed me into the waking world. The sensation of being watched hadn't gone away. It was like I was being pulled in two directions at once, tethered to something that wasn't me. The next few nights, it happened again. The same dream, over and over. But the more I dreamt, the clearer it became. The version of me in the dream was taking over my life. Little things at first. I'd watch as he'd take my seat at the dinner table. I'd watch him kiss my girlfriend. On the cheek, talk to my friends, laugh at my jokes. But there was no warmth, no real connection. It was like he was mimicking me, pretending. I watched myself in the third person, disconnected from every action, and each time I couldn't stop. Him. The feeling was growing stronger, more intense. The worst part wasn't just the dreams, it was the way the world began to blur between what I saw in my sleep and what I saw when I was awake. I'd I'd walk into a room and feel like I had been there before. I'd hear a conversation and feel like I'd already heard it, already responded to it. But no one else seemed to notice. I could feel the boundaries between reality and my dreams eroding, and it terrified me. The worst night came 2 weeks ago. I was lying in bed, my eyes wide, open, staring at the ceiling. I didn't want to sleep. I didn't want to dream. But when I closed my eyes, I was there again, watching myself, watching him. This time he wasn't alone. There were others. A crowd of people standing behind me, staring with their cold, empty eyes. They were all watching me as I slept. I wasn't sure who they were, but their presence felt ... familiar. And then I smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It was empty, cold. He tilted his head and said, "You'll never stop me. You'll never have." That was the moment I knew. I wasn't dreaming anymore. I was living in someone else's story, and there was nothing I could do to stop the ending. I tried to keep my eyes open, to fight the pull of sleep, but it felt like the world itself was conspiring against me. The moment my eyelids fluttered shut, I was there again, to dream. No, it wasn't a dream. I wasn't sure what to call it anymore. It had taken on a life of its own, a creeping, suffocating thing that clung to me. And now I could feel it, trying to swallow me whole. I was in a park, sitting on a bench under a tree I didn't recognize. The leaves were twisted and dark, but the wind that blew through them was soft, too soft. I could hear voices, faint, distant, like a low hum, and yet no one was around. I looked down at my hands, and for a moment, they weren't mine. They were too pale, too delicate. They trembled as they rested on my lap. I tried to pull them away, but they wouldn't move. I couldn't move. And then, as I turned my head, I saw the crowd.
Ow.
They were always there, lingering at the edge of my vision. But now they were closer, watching, silent, unmoving. I knew they weren't real. No one else could see them, just like no one could see me anymore. But I wasn't alone in the park. He was there. The other version of me, the one with the cold eyes and the lifeless smile. He stood across from me, looking down at me, a shadow. Of a person? Why do you fight it? His voice was smooth, almost too smooth. It slid over my skin like oil. You know you can't escape. This is you now. I wanted to scream, to run, to punch him in the face. But nothing happened. I couldn't even raise my arms. My chest tightened, and I could feel my breath coming in shallow, desperate gasps. The worst part wasn't the words no. It was the feeling, the complete and utter emptiness that came with it. Like I was already gone, already lost in some dimension where I didn't belong. And this thing had taken my place. The crowd shifted, they moved closer. I couldn't make out their faces, they were too blurry, too far away to be real. But I could feel their eyes on me, watching, waiting. Don't you get it? He continued, stepping forward. I've already won. We're never meant to be here. You were always just a visitor. I wanted to scream, but all that came out was a hoarse whisper. What do you want from me? His smile grew wider, stretching unnaturally. Nothing at all. You're already gone. The words sank in like stones, heavy and cold. Gone. How could that be? How could I not exist? Anymore? It didn't make sense, but nothing made sense anymore. All I had now were fragments, glimpses of things I didn't recognize, moments I couldn't remember. Was I ever truly here? Or had I always been a shadow in my own life, a bystander in my own story? I closed my eyes, trying to wake up, trying to pull myself out of the nightmare, but the world refused to let me go. Suddenly, I heard the faintest sound, the rustle of paper. When I opened my eyes again, there was a note in my hand, as if it had appeared out of nowhere. It was simple, written in a hurried, scrawling hand. You're not alone. I blinked, confused, trying to understand. But before I could make sense of it, the note disappeared, dissolving like mist in the wind. Asha. I tried to call out, to ask who had written it, but no voice came. Only silence. I was left alone with the crowd, the other me, and a growing sense of terror that I couldn't shake. Something was changing. I could feel it in the air. A tension, a shift, as if the ground beneath me was slowly crumbling away. I wasn't sure what to do or how to stop it, and then, just as I thought I might break, just as I thought I might lose everything, the world shifted again. The sky above me cracked. A line, jagged and deep, spread across the heavens like a wound that could never heal. And from that tear came a voice. It's time. The words weren't spoken. They weren't even spoken to me. They were just there, inside me, like they were always there. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming now. Suffocating. There was no more time left to fight. I had to make a choice. I could stay here, in this twisted version of my life, where I was nothing but a shadow, a dream, or I could try to escape. But where would I go? How could I even leave when the world itself was starting to fracture? The other me took a step forward. His smile was gone now, replaced with something darker, something colder. You'll never leave, he said, his voice low, almost a growl. I'll always be here. And then he reached out, his cold fingers brushing against my arm. Sent a jolt through me like electricity, and suddenly, everything went dark. I woke up again, but this time, everything was different. The air smelled wrong, the room felt wrong. I wasn't in my bed anymore. I wasn't anywhere familiar. I was standing in a room I didn't recognize. The walls were bare, the windows shut tight. The only light came from a flickering bulb overhead. My reflection stared back at me from a cracked mirror on the wall. Except it wasn't me, it was him, and this time, it was wearing my skin. I blinked hard, my heart thundering in my chest. The reflection in the mirror didn't change. It stood there, unmoving, grinning at me with a smile that didn't belong to me. My face, the one I had lived in for so long, was now an imposter's canvas. The eyes staring back at me were cold, empty, like they'd never known warmth, like they'd never known me. I staggered back, tripping over my own feet, my hands pressing against the wall to steady myself. My breath came in sharp, desperate gasps. This couldn't be happening. It had to be dreaming, had to be sleeping. But the taste of the air bitter and sterile was too real. My fingertips dug into the rough texture of the wall, grounding me. I wasn't dreaming. This was real. I spun around, trying to make sense of my surroundings. The room was small, bare, almost clinical in its emptiness. No furniture, no personal touches, just for sterile walls and a single flickering light above. It was like a room meant to hold nothing. And yet, somehow, I felt the weight of its presence, like it was a cage. My pulse raced as I turned back to the mirror. The other. Mino, it was still there. Watching, it didn't move, didn't blink. Just stared, with that awful knowing grin. Its lips parted slowly, as though it had all the time in the world. You didn't think I'd just let you wake up, did you? It spoke. Its voice, impossibly calm, was my voice, but wrong and natural, hollow, like a mockery. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. My throat felt dry, constricted. The reflection in the mirror shifted then. It tilted its head slightly, the way I would do when I was curious. But this tilt felt wrong and nerving. It leaned closer to the glass, pressing its face so close that I could see the subtle cracks forming along its skin. You should have known better, it whispered. You've never been in control, not of your life, not of your choices. You're just a passenger, and I'm the one driving now. I recoiled, hands shaking. I don't belong here. This isn't me. The thought ricocheted in my mind, a mantra, something I had to believe. But the more I tried to convince myself, the more it slipped away, like sand through my fingers. Who are you? I managed to croak, the words feeling foreign, as though I had to force them out of my mouth. The thing in the mirror, I smiled again, that same cold, empty smile. I'm everything you've always been, and everything you're not. I wanted to scream, to tear myself away from this nightmare. But I couldn't. My legs felt like lead. My body didn't obey. My hands, trembling violently, reached for the mirror, as if I could touch some part of myself that wasn't. It wasn't real, I kept telling myself. None of this is real. But then, to my horror, my own reflection reached out and grabbed my wrist. The grip was cold, far too cold for a human touch, and it pulled me forward with an unnatural strength. I gasped, but the reflection didn't stop. It dragged me, twisting my arm in ways I didn't think was possible, until my face was inches. From the cracked glass, "You were never the one," it murmured, its voice too close, too familiar. "The body you've been walking around in. Mine, the life you thought you were living. Mine, and now that I'm awake, there's no going back." The words felt like a weight. Like the gravity of the situation was crushing me under its sheer pressure. I wanted to pull away to escape, but it held me there, its eyes boring into mine, locked in this nightmarish reflection. "What do you want from me?" I rasped, every ounce of my voice drained. The fear rising up my throat like bile, it laughed soft, like a whisper of something forgotten, something ancient. "I want what you've always had, but you never realized was mine." A smile deepened. "I want everything, and when I'm done with you, there won't even be a trace left of who you were." I tried to scream, but my throat closed up. The sound that came out was nothing at all. And then, something strange happened. The mirror started to ripple. Glass seemed to breathe, bending in and out like it was alive. Warping around the edges, pulsing with something dark. "Don't fight it," it said softly, as if coaxing. "A child into accepting the inevitable, you'll never win." The room was closing in on me. The walls seemed to lean in, the ceiling lowering inch by inch. The air thickened, grew dense and suffocating. I had to get out. I had to break free. But how? How could I escape when the thing that I feared the most was inside, me wearing my skin, living my life? I turned away from the mirror desperately, searching for an exit, some way out of this. The room felt endless, like it was alive, shifting, folding on itself. And then I saw it. The door. A simple wooden door at the far end of the room, barely visible in the shadows, I didn't think. Just moved, stumbling toward it, my legs numb beneath me, my reflection didn't follow. It stayed behind, standing motionless, grinning at me as if it already knew I'd try to run. My hand shook as I reached for the doorknob. It felt like it took forever for my fingers to grip it. The moment I turned it, a chill ran down my spine. The door opened with a soft creak, and I stepped into the unknown. The hallway beyond was dark, like it had never been lit before, the air thick with something oppressive, something I couldn't name. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I had no choice now but to keep moving, deeper into this place, this world that no longer felt like mine. I had to keep running, and then, behind me, the voice came again. "You can't escape." You never could, but this time I didn't answer. I just kept walking into the dark, where the shadows had already begun to stretch. Waiting to swallow me whole, the hallway stretched endlessly, like some vast, inescapable labyrinth. I could hear my footsteps echoing, but the sound was distant, muted, swallowed by the air around me. I couldn't see the end, just more walls, dark corners, and the faintest flicker of light far ahead. The further I walked, the more the sensation of being watched grew tighter, heavier. The air was thick, like I was moving through liquid. Every step felt like it was being pulled backward, as though something invisible was trying to drag me into the shadows. I need to get out. The thought ran through my mind like a chant, a desperate prayer. But where was I going? Where was I? I glanced behind me once, and the door I had just walked through was already gone. Not even a trace of it remained, just more hallway, endless and unbroken. It was as if the room, the mirror, had never existed at all. I turned away, fighting. The wave of panic that threatened to rise within me. I needed to keep moving. There had to be an answer somewhere. But my feet felt heavy, dragging with every step. The hallway twisted and turned on itself, like it was bending in unnatural ways. It was hard to focus. I could feel my mind unraveling, threads coming loose, the edges of my thoughts fraying. The longer I stayed in this place, the harder it became. To distinguish between what was real and what wasn't, I reached a bend in the hallway. The flickering light ahead pulsed like a heartbeat, steady but erratic. And as I neared it, I heard something whispers. They were faint at first, just barely audible. But as I stepped closer, the voices grew louder. Disjointed, overlapping, murmuring words I couldn't understand. My breath caught in my throat. There was no one else here. It couldn't be real, but the whispers felt.
How familiar?
I stopped in front of the light, unsure what to do. The whispers were growing more distinct, more urgent. I leaned in, straining to hear, to make sense of them. You're not who you think you are. He's coming for you. Up! Wake up now! Suddenly, the light flickered once, twice, then went out completely. I was plunged into darkness, the whispers silenced in an instant. I froze, my heart pounding so hard in my chest that I thought it might burst. And then, the door appeared. It was just there. Not far from me, where the light had been, a door materialized out of thin air. Its edges were jagged, the wood cracked and weathered. A deep red stain marred the surface, something fresh, still wet. I couldn't explain it, but everything inside. Me screamed at me not to go near it, but I didn't have a choice. I took a step forward, my fingers reaching for the handle before I could stop myself. My hand hovered over the cold brass for a second, the hairs on my arms standing up. The door. Didn't feel like a door, it felt like an invitation. An invitation to something I didn't understand, something I wasn't sure I wanted to understand. I pulled it open. The room beyond was different. At first, it was just a blur, a strange blend of colors and shapes that felt too close, too invasive. My eyes stung from trying to focus. It was like looking through a foggy window, distorted, out of place. But slowly, as my eyes adjusted, the room became clearer. It wasn't a room at all. It was another reflection. The space was familiar, yet foreign, like I had stepped into the inside of my own mind, twisted and rearranged. It was a version of my apartment, but everything was wrong. Furniture was too large, the walls too narrow, windows were too high, like they were above me. The air was thick, heavy with a kind of oppressive weight that made my chest ache. And then I saw it. Him, the other me, standing in the center of the room, staring out the window, back turned to me. But this time it wasn't a reflection. It was solid, real. He was there. He was there. The room around me seemed to hold its breath, suspended in time. There was no sound, no movement, just him, frozen in place. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I just stared at him, the other me. He wasn't me, not in any real sense. He was someone else, someone who had taken over everything I had known, everything I thought was mine. I stepped forward cautiously, drawn to him despite myself. Something in me, something primal, told me to run, to get away before it was too late. But I couldn't turn back. Not now. And then he spoke. "You're still here?" His voice was flat, distant, like he was talking to someone who wasn't quite there. I froze. He was speaking to me. "I didn't think you'd last this long," he continued, his back still turned to me. "They break. They fade away. But you've been stubborn. I'll give you that." I didn't know what to say. My throat was dry. My voice caught in my chest. "What do you want?" His shoulders tensed, and then he turned slowly, his cold eyes locking onto mine. There was no warmth in them, no recognition, only a hollow emptiness. He was looking through me, not at me. "What do I want?" he repeated, as though the question was absurd. He smiled, but it wasn't a smile. It was something far darker, far more unsettling. "I want everything you have. Every piece of you. And when I'm done, I'll leave nothing behind but the shell of what was." I took a step back, heart pounding. "You don't have to do this. I don't belong here." His grin widened. "It's too late for that. You were never meant to belong here. You're always a placeholder, a shadow. You think this world, this life, is yours. It was never yours to begin with." I stumbled backward, fear spreading like wildfire. The walls around me seemed to close in, the air thick with the suffocating weight of his words. I was drowning in them. The room began to distort again, bending, folding. The edges of the walls rippled like water, the floor shifting beneath my feet. The door behind me was gone, replaced with more darkness. "You can't escape," he said, his voice a whisper now, almost too quiet to hear. He never could. I turned and ran. There was nothing else I could do. I wasn't sure where I was running to anymore. All I knew was that if I stopped, if I turned around, I would lose, and I couldn't afford to lose. Not again. The hallway seemed endless, stretching on and on like a maze with no exit. And as I ran, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't just being chased. I was being pulled into a reality where I didn't belong, where I was never supposed to be. And somewhere in the dark, I could hear him following me. His voice, my voice, echoing in the corridors. "You'll never escape me. You never have." I ran, my legs burned with the effort, my feet stumbling across the uneven ground, each step more desperate than the last. I didn't look back. I couldn't look back. The fear, the dread gnawed at me like a parasite, eating away at my thoughts. Every corridor I passed through, every turn I made, felt like I was sinking deeper into the labyrinth. The walls around me seemed to warp and bend, like they were made of liquid, constantly shifting, swallowing me whole. I felt like I was being sucked into a vortex, the hallways stretching out endlessly in front of me. There was no escape. I knew there was no escape, and yet I kept running. Each breath I took was jagged, shallow, as if the very air around me was pressing in on my chest. My heart hammered in my ears, drowning out everything except the feeling of being pursued. But it wasn't just him I was running from. It was everything, the world, this place, the cold, oppressive feeling that something wasn't right. Nothing had ever been right. And then, just as I thought I couldn't go any further, I saw it. A door. It was faint at first, barely visible in the dark, but as I drew closer, I could see it clearly. The door wasn't like the others. It wasn't. The weathered wood or cracked edges I had become used to. No, this one was sleek, pristine. It shimmered in the dim light, glowing faintly, almost as if it were beckoning me. I didn't hesitate. I lunged for the door, my hand reaching out for the handle before I could think, my breath ragged in my throat. The moment my fingers made contact with the cool surface, I yanked it open, and I stepped into a different place entirely. The air was crisp, clean. I could taste the faint scent of rain, of fresh earth. My eyes adjusted to the soft light around me, and I realized I wasn't in the hallway anymore. I was standing in the middle of a forest. Tall trees loomed overhead, their branches heavy with leaves that swayed gently in the wind. The ground beneath me was soft, covered in a thick layer of moss. Asterisk, I blinked, confusion flooding my mind. Where? Am I this place? It felt wrong in a way that words couldn't describe. It was too perfect, too serene. It didn't belong here. I started walking. First it was just instinct, my feet carrying me forward, trying to make sense of everything. But the further I went, the more out of place everything felt. The trees were unnaturally still, as though they were holding their breath. The sky above was a strange shade of pale, not quite blue. It's not quite grayle, like the color of a dream before it slips away. I stopped in my tracks when I heard something. A voice, soft at first, but unmistakable. You can't outrun it forever. Turned around, my heart leaping into my throat. There, standing at the edge of the trees, was him, the other me. The smile, that cold, empty grin, stretched across its face like a grotesque mask. "You're still running?" it asked, tilting, its head with mock curiosity. "Do you really think it'll make a difference?" I felt the ground shift beneath my feet like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, teetering on the brink of something vast and unknowable. "Why are you doing this?" I found my voice, though it was trembling, thin. "What do you want from me?" The thing stepped forward, the smile never leaving its face. "What do I want? Oh, you'll understand soon enough. You always do." It raised a hand, gesturing around us at the trees, the sky, the impossible quiet. You've been running, but you're already here. This place, this world, it's mine. It always has been. I stumbled backward, my mind struggling to process its words. The world around me began to flicker, the trees blurring, the ground beneath me warping. It was as if the very fabric of reality was starting to fray at the edges. No, I whispered, shaking my head. This isn't real. None of this is real. What it is, it said, its voice low, smooth. This is the only reality you'll ever know. You just don't remember it yet. But you will, soon enough. The trees bent toward me, their branches twisting like fingers, reaching for me, pulling at the air. The sky above darkened, and the soft breeze turned cold, sharp. I could feel the pressure building, the weight of it, the suffocating sense that something was closing in around me. I turned to run, but the ground beneath me seemed to shift again. The trees, the forest, everything around me was folding in on itself, twisting into something darker, more oppressive.
Ow.
The air grew thick with the scent of decay, of rot. The world around me crumbled, and then, without warning, the ground vanished beneath my feet. I fell, plummeting into nothingness, my body weightless, spinning through a black void. My breath caught in my throat as the darkness swallowed me whole. There was no up, no down, just endless falling. I screamed. I could feel myself being torn apart by the weight of it, by the crushing sense of wrongness that wrapped itself around me like chains, and then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. I landed hard on the ground, my knees buckling beneath me. My head spun, my vision blurred. I was back in the hallway, the same hallway, the one I had been running through before, but this time it was different. The walls seemed to press in closer, the light flickering more erratically. The whispers returned, louder now, more frantic. I could hear them all around me, inside my head. You're not in control. You never were. You've always been here. This is your story now. I pushed myself up, my legs unsteady, my mind reeling. The door I had come through was gone. In its place was only more darkness, an endless, suffocating void. The other me was gone too, or maybe it was still there, just hidden in the shadows. I didn't know anymore. I couldn't trust my senses. I wasn't sure if I was still running, or if I had simply walked right into the trap. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to steady my breath, to make sense of everything. When I opened them again, I found myself standing before a new door. It was made of the same cold, gleaming metal as the others, the same distorted design. But this one felt different. It hummed with something familiar. I reached for the handle. Before I could touch it, I heard a voice, a whisper, soft but clear. Don't open it. I froze, the words cutting through the haze of fear clouding my mind, but it was too late. The door swung open on its own, revealing what lay behind it, and I knew, in that moment, that whatever was waiting on the other side would change everything. I had no choice but to step through. The story was no longer mine to control. The moment I stepped through the door, I felt the world tilt. For a split second, everything was weightless, as though gravity had momentarily lost its grip on me. Then, with a sickening lurch, I crashed into something solid. I gasped, blinking, disoriented. The air was colder, here frigid, almost unnatural. I looked around, and my breath caught in my throat. I was in a room, but it wasn't like any room I'd ever seen. The walls were made of mirrored glass, reflecting my every move, every twitch of my muscles, as though the room was alive, aware. Every time I turned my head, I was greeted by dozens of identical versions of myself staring back. But they weren't just reflections, they were different. Each version of me had slight variations, small, unsettling details that didn't belong. One had darker eyes. Another's smile was too wide, stretching too far. One of them was staring at me with a look of pure disgust. Couldn't escape their eyes, couldn't break free from their gaze. It felt as though I were being dissected, studied from every angle. I could hear my own breath echoing in the room. amplified, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. The walls pulsed softly as if the entire place were alive. "What is this?" I whispered, but my voice sounded muffled as if I were speaking through thick glass. No answer. Just the sound of my voice, their voices, repeating the question over and over in the background. I took a step forward. Instantly, every version of me mirrored the movement. Every twitch of my fingers, every subtle shift of my posture. It was like I was surrounded by a dozen copies of myself, trapped in a loop. My heart began to race as the suffocating realization hit me. They were all me. All of them. I walked further into the room, and the reflections followed suit. Each of them was me, but they were never me. They were fragmented, broken pieces of who I was, of who I thought I was. And then, as if some invisible switch had been flipped, they started to speak. "You're not real," one version of me said, its voice hollow, empty. "You were never supposed to be. You don't belong here." Another echoed, "You never did." I felt the air in the room tighten, the weight of their words pressing in on me, suffocating me. My chest felt tight, as though something heavy was sitting on it, crushing the air out of my lungs. "You're a placeholder," one of the reflections snarled. "Nothing more," recoiled, instinctively reaching for my throat, but there was nothing there. No hand, no body, just the space in the air where it should have been. My vision blurred. The ground felt like it was shifting beneath me. "Stop." I breathed. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I couldn't move. The mirrors began to warp, their edges curling inward like smoke, distorting the reflections. Further, one of them, the one with the wide, empty grin, stepped forward. "You've always been a shadow," it said, its voice grating, sharp as a razor, a hollow version of the real thing. I tried to step back, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. It was like I was being held in place, stuck in the middle of the room, trapped in an endless cycle of mirrors. "You were never meant to have this life," it continued, its voice growing louder, echoing off the walls. "You were never supposed to be here. The story wasn't yours to begin with. You were just a ghost in someone else's narrative." The word ghost struck me like a blow to the chest. My heart raced, the panic rising in my throat. I wanted to scream, to break free, to run, but where could I run? The mirrors surrounded me, closing in with every passing second. Every version of me, him, just kept talking, taunting, mocking. "You were always the other, weren't you?" It whispered, its voice low and dangerous. "Not the one who was supposed to live. Just the one who takes over, takes everything." I staggered backward, my head spinning, the echoes of my other selves suffocating me. My mind felt fractured, like pieces of it were falling away, too fast for me to grab hold of. It was too much. The weight, the pressure, the truth of it all. "Stop," I shouted. "Please." "I don't know what you want from me." "I don't." But the room only deepened, the mirrors stretching farther, pulling me into the reflection until I was surrounded by nothing but distorted versions of myself. And in that moment, I felt it, the unmistakable sensation that I had been here before. I had been in this exact moment, this exact room, this exact feeling of being trapped. My mind began to reel as the pieces of memory tumbled together like shards of glass. The dream, the woman in the coffee shop, the man me across the table, smiling with empty eyes, the hallway, the door that led here. I knew what was happening. The mirrors, the reflections. The world around me wasn't just some place I had stumbled into. It was a creation, a trap. And then I understood. I had always been here. The truth of it hit me like a hammer. All this time, I hadn't been running from someone else. I wasn't being pursued. I wasn't even the one in control. I was the one being watched. I was the one who had been placed here not as a person, but as a story, an imperfect fragment, a placeholder for the real me. I was a character in a narrative I didn't understand, one that wasn't mine to begin with. A puppet, a ghost, the door, the hallway, the forest. It was all part of the same trap, designed to make me question myself, make me believe I was the one who didn't belong. But it was never about me at all. I wasn't just living someone else's life. I was living their story, and they were always watching. The thought paralyzed me, leaving me motionless, unable to move. I stood there in front of the mirrors, my distorted selves surrounding me, whispering, laughing, jeering. "You'll never wake up," one of them said, its grin impossibly wide. "You'll never escape." I took a deep breath, my chest tight, but something shifted inside me. A small, quiet spark of defiance. "No," I said, barely above a whisper, but the words felt real. They felt like my own. "I won't let you win." And for the first time, in what felt like forever, I turned away from the mirrors. I walked one step, then another. The reflections didn't follow. The room didn't change, but something deep inside me did. I wasn't going to give in to the story. I wasn't going to be his shadow, his puppet. I would find a way to break free, to take back what had been stolen from me. The door behind me flickered. I was done being watched, and this time, I would write my own ending. The door behind me flickered again, its edges trembling like the last gasp of a dream trying to hold on. To its form, my heart raced, but the pulse wasn't fear anymore. It was determination. I wasn't trapped, not anymore. The mirrors on the walls continued to reflect my every movement, but they were starting to blur just slightly at first. The distorted versions of me that surrounded me began to lose focus, their features becoming less defined, their eyes less knowing. It was like they were fading, becoming something less solid, less real. And with every step I took away from them, their presence became more distant, more insubstantial. I didn't look back. I refused to. Every inch I moved away from them felt like a victory, a rebellion against the puppet strings that had kept me tethered to this nightmare. The door. I needed to reach the door. I stepped forward, my footsteps muffled by the strange, shifting ground beneath me. The closer I got to the door, the more the air around me seemed to hum, vibrating with an energy that felt both foreign and familiar. It was like I was walking toward something that had always been waiting for me, a part of the world that had always been just out of reach. But now I could feel at the edges of the boundary between reality and this twisted narrative were beginning to slip away. My hand was inches from the door's handle when I heard it again, the voice. This time, it wasn't from the reflections. It wasn't from the endless versions of me. It came from inside me. "Where do you think you're going?" The voice was low, smooth to calm. It was mine, but not. "Can't leave. Not after everything." I froze, my hand hovering above the handle. For a moment, I didn't know whether to open the door or turn around. Deep down, I already knew this wasn't just some voice from the past. This wasn't the world taunting me. It was him, the one who had always been there, the one who had always controlled the story, the real me. I let my fingers curl around the cool metal of the door handle, and slowly, deliberately, I turned it. The door opened with a soft creak, and I stepped through, and immediately, the world shifted. It wasn't the cold, reflective glass of the mirrored room. It wasn't the dark hallways or the forest that never seemed to end. No, this place felt alive. It hummed with a strange electric energy, like the air itself was waiting for something to happen. The walls were no longer mirrors. They were made of something else, something ancient and unspoken. The floor beneath me was soft, like grass, but with the texture of something far older, almost organic. I took a deep breath and looked around. The place was vast, so vast that it seemed to stretch on forever, the boundaries of reality blurring into an infinite horizon. There was a sense of space here that made my head spin. Time didn't seem to exist in the same way it did before. It was as if I had stepped into a place where everything and nothing coexisted at once. I felt small, but not in a way that made me afraid. More like I was standing at the edge of something vast, something I couldn't quite comprehend, but could finally feel. The air was thick with something that I couldn't name, like the sensation of possibility, of potential. Then I saw it. At the center of this place was a single ancient tree. Its trunk was enormous, impossibly wide, covered in strange shifting symbols that glowed faintly with an inner light. The The roots stretched out beneath the ground like a labyrinth. And above, the branches spread out in all directions, twisting upward into the infinite sky. It was the source of everything, the pulse of this place. And at the very top, something glinted in the light, a small, delicate object. It's barely visible from where I stood. A door within the tree. Gosh. And this one felt different. It felt like the gateway to something real, something mine. I began to walk toward it, the ground beneath me soft with each step. But with every step, the sense of urgency grew. There was something waiting on the other side of that door. Something important. And that voice, the one that had followed me from the reflections, the one that had spoken from within, me spoke again. "You don't belong here," it whispered. So softly it felt like it was in my ear. "You think you're free, but you're still trapped. Still a puppet. Still nothing more than a shadow." I clenched my fists, my jaw tight. No, I wasn't going to let him control this. I wasn't going to be his story anymore. I quickened my pace, the tree growing larger with every step. I could see the door more clearly now. There was a keyholes, small, almost delicate, as though it had been waiting for me to find it. The door was meant for me. But as I neared, I realized something. The air around the door was shifting, warping. Something was trying to stop me from reaching it, from crossing that final threshold. The ground beneath me seemed to quiver, and the tree's branches twisted, as though reaching for me, trying to pull me back. "You can't escape it," the voice repeated, louder now. "You'll never escape the story. You're part of it. You always have been." I reached out and touched the tree's trunk, feeling its rough, ancient bark beneath my fingers. The symbols on the tree began to glow brighter, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. The voice in my mind grew frantic, panicked, as though it were being torn apart from the inside. "No, stop." But it was too late. I didn't stop. I couldn't. I slid my fingers into the keyhole, and the door before me clicked open. A wave of pure energy rushed through me, and everything around me seemed to fracture. The sky cracked, the earth trembled, and the air itself screamed. The world. I had known the mirrors, the hallways, the reflections, the shifting stories. Everything began to crumble. It all disintegrated into a million pieces, dissolving into the air like dust. I stepped through the door, and everything went white. For a moment, there was nothing. No time, no place. I woke up, but this time it was different. The world around me was familiar. The air smelled like morning, the crisp, clean scent of the earth after rain. The sun shone through the window, casting golden light across the room. I was sitting in a chair, my hands resting in my lap. It was peaceful, real. I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the world. It was my world, the one I remembered, the one I thought I had lost. And then, just as I turned away from the window, I saw it. A door. It stood in the corner of the room, gleaming, its handle twisted in a way I'd never seen before. I walked toward it this time. I wasn't afraid. This time I would choose the story. I stood there, facing the door, my hand hovering above the handle. It felt different than before, more solid, more real, but there was something about it that still made my pulse quicken. Maybe it was the way it shimmered in the light, as though it were a memory just on the edge of clarity, fading in and out of focus. Was this the end of the story? I didn't know. I didn't care. What mattered was that I had already made my choice. The door represented something more than just an exit. It represented control. I had walked through countless doors, each one opening into a version of myself, a reflection of who I thought I was. But this was different. This was the door I would choose, not one that was forced upon me. I would take back the narrative, take back the life that had always been mine to begin with. With a deep breath, I grabbed the handle. The door swung, opened slowly, creaking with a sound that felt like the world exhaling. A burst of cool air rushed in, wrapping around me like the first breath after drowning. For a brief moment, everything fell silent. No voices, no reflections, no endless echoes. Stepped through. The space on the other side was familiar. Too familiar It was the same room from before, the one I had woken up in. The sunlight streamed through the window, casting long shadows across the floor. The chair, the desk, everything was in its place. But as I looked around, something was off. The air was still, stagnant, like time had stopped here, waiting for something to happen. And then I saw it. In the corner of the room, nestled against the wall, was a mirror. It was the same mirror from the hallway, the one that had always reflected. Something just slightly different. The one that always made me feel like I wasn't alone. This mirror was different now, though. It wasn't just reflecting me. It was reflecting everything, the room, the space around me, every small detail. But there was something else in it. Something that made my stomach churn. I wasn't looking at myself. I was looking at him. The other me. The version of me that had always been just beyond my reach. Lurking in the shadows, taking over my life. My choices. His eyes met mine through the glass, and for a moment everything stopped. I had never seen him like this before. He was whole, staring back at me with that cold, knowing smile as though he had always been the one in control. Mirror didn't reflect who I was anymore. It reflected who I could have been if I hadn't fought to break free. His mouth moved as if he was speaking, but the words didn't reach me. I couldn't hear them. I took a step closer. My heartbeat was deafening in my ears, but I didn't stop. I pressed my palm against the cool surface of the mirror, feeling the smoothness beneath my fingers. For a moment, I thought I saw him reach for me, his hand coming toward the glass. But then, just as quickly, he vanished. The room grew darker. I pulled my hand away from the mirror, feeling a chill crawl up my spine. The air shifted, thickening like fog, and I felt a strange pull toward the center of the room, toward the reflection. Something was shifting again, something I couldn't see, but could feel. I turned, my gaze instinctively drawn to the door, the one I had come through, but it wasn't there anymore. The room had changed. It wasn't the same space anymore. Walls were now shifting, the furniture warping in the corners of my vision, and the air felt heavier, as though the very fabric of the room was bending. Not yet. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. It was that same low, calm voice that had haunted me, only now it felt like it was inside my own head. His voice. The voice of the one who had been pulling the strings all along. "You don't get to. Leave," it whispered. "Not yet. This is where it ends." I spun around, searching for him. I had felt him before in the corner of my mind, in the shadow of every room I had walked through. But now, his presence was closing in. The walls began to press in on me, the room shrinking, collapsing. The mirror, still hanging in the corner, seemed to be the only thing left untouched. Its surface shimmered once more, and as I looked into it, I saw something. It wasn't just the other me anymore. It was us. We were standing there, together, side by side, in the reflection. Both of us two inversions of the same person, only. He was no longer a reflection. He was real. He was standing in front of me, his eyes dark and empty. A grin spread across his face, and he opened his mouth. "Isn't it too late to fight?" he asked. His voice echoed around me, coming from the mirror, coming from everywhere. "Isn't this who you were always meant to be?" "No," I said, my voice shaking, but resolute. "You're not me." He laughed softly, the sound a low hum in the room. "We're one and the same, aren't we? We always have been. You don't get to control this. You never have." I took a step forward, my fists clenched at my sides. "I do control this. I'm not going to be your puppet anymore." The room seemed to shift again. The walls bent inward, the air thickened, and the mirror began to distort. I reached out, my fingers trembling as I grasped the edge of the mirror. The glass was warm beneath my fingertips, and as I pushed against it, I felt a resistance, like something was trying to keep me inside. The voice inside my head grew louder, more desperate. "You can't. You won't. You're trapped, just like I always wanted. You're mine." I didn't listen. I didn't stop. I pushed harder, my hand pushing through the glass, feeling it shatter under my touch, piece by piece as I broke through. The world around me cracked, splintered, out like the fragments of a broken story. With a final, forceful shove, I stepped through the mirror. The sound of shattering glass echoed around me, but it wasn't just the mirror breaking. It was everything. The room, the walls, the story itself, all of it was coming apart. I stood there, breathing heavily as the world dissolved around me. And then, in the silence that followed, there was only me. No other version. No reflection, just me. I was free. But there was no door, no mirror, no reflection left to run from. I was done being watched. I was done being a character in someone else's story. Now, I would be the one to write the ending. I stood in the silence, feeling the remnants of everything that had been unraveling around me, hanging in the air like smoke. The world felt like it was holding its breath, waiting. Waiting for me, but for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't scared. There was no voice in my head whispering threats. No mirrors, no reflections staring back at me with knowing eyes. I wasn't haunted anymore. I wasn't anyone's. Story, I was free. But that feeling of freedom, of emptiness, began to settle into something else. A question, what now? I hadn't thought beyond breaking free. I hadn't considered what the world would look like once I was untethered from the narrative, once the strings were cut. It was easy to fight for control when you were running from something, but now that I had nothing left to run from, what was left? The sky above me was endless. The ground beneath me was solid, unyielding, but it felt unfamiliar, as though I had stepped into a place that existed between worlds, somewhere that was both everything and nothing. Somewhere that didn't belong in the story. Was this my new life? This place with no boundaries, no rules? I began walking, the soft earth beneath my feet steady, grounding me. There were no paths, no direction. I just walked. With every step, I felt more of myself coming back. Pieces I hadn't realized were missing, slowly sliding back into place. But even as I walked, the question gnawed at me. Where was everyone else? For all my struggles, my fight against the mirrored versions of myself, I had never truly questioned who was left in the world I had abandoned. What had I really left behind? And what if that world wasn't as gone as I thought? The horizon stretched endlessly before me. It wasn't a physical place. It was a concept, a place, suspended between what was real and what was imagined. It felt as though it was part of a much larger tapestry, a story of its own, one that had always been waiting for me to step inside it. And there was something else, something pulling me forward. I wasn't alone, not really. I continued walking, moving toward the horizon. The world wasn't empty after all. I could feel it now, the presence of others, like a hum beneath the surface of reality. I wasn't sure who they were, but I knew they were there. They were waiting, just like I had been. In the distance, the shapes of figures began to appear. Faint at first, like shadows moving just beyond my sight, but then clearer. The closer I got, the more I could see. Faces, shapes, people. I was no longer alone in this space. But these weren't reflections of me. These were people, real people, I realized with a start. It's not echoes, not ghosts of who I had been, but living, breathing people who shared this space with me. They were walking too, some looking ahead, others lost in their own thoughts, but all moving towards something. I quickened my pace, my heart thudding in my chest. As I drew closer, I began to notice the way their faces shifted, like pieces of a puzzle, not quite fitting together, not quite right. There was something about them that didn't belong, something familiar, but wrong. They had that same vacant look I had seen in the reflections, the same hollow gaze. I stopped. One of the men, older man, with tired eyes and graying hair, turned toward me. His gaze was sharp, almost too sharp. His smile was faint, too faint. "You're here," he said, his voice low, but full of a strange, almost hollow welcome. "We've been waiting. For what?" I asked, my throat dry, suddenly feeling a wave of unease wash over me. He didn't answer right away. Steady just stared at me, as though considering the question carefully. "For you to remember," he said, his voice softer now, almost like a whisper. "You have remembered, haven't you?" The words didn't quite make sense. Remember? What did he mean? I felt the old familiar weight in my chest, the feeling that something was off. Something in this world was ... broken. The man stepped closer, smile widening just a fraction, the shadows around him shifting unnaturally. "The story was never really yours to begin with," he continued, his voice growing clearer. "We're all characters in it, just like you. We're all part of the same narrative. The problem is, we're stuck. You, me, all of us. Stuck inside the frame of someone else's mind." I took a step back, the words gnawing at me like a sickness. Someone else's mind? "No," I said, shaking my head. "I'm not part of that story anymore." I broke free. I chose. His gaze softened, but only slightly. "Did you? Or did you just wander into a new chapter?" He paused, watching me carefully. "You can't escape what you are. The ending has always been written. There is no free. There is only the story." The weight of his words sank into me, and I could feel the air shift again. The ground beneath me seemed to tremble. The people around us shifted as well, their faces turning toward me, their smiles faltering just slightly. "You're in a different page now," the man said, his voice lowering. "But that doesn't mean you're free. You've just been placed somewhere new. Somewhere temporary." A shiver ran down my spine. "No," I said again, my voice shaking. "I'm not a character. I'm not your story. I'm mine." He didn't respond. He didn't need to, because as he spoke, the world around me began to twist again. I could feel it, the ground trembling beneath my feet, the horizon warping. The figures around me slowly becoming hazier, like the ink of a page running in the rain. It was happening again. I was losing it. I could feel the pull of the story, the one I had fought so hard to escape. It was tugging at me, twisting its threads around my limbs, pulling me back into the narrative, back into the world I thought I had left behind. "No," I screamed, fighting against the weight of the words, the pull of that familiar force. Stumbled, my breath shallow, my heart racing, but I couldn't stop it. I was being dragged backward. And as I looked around, the figures, those people, began to fade again. Their faces contorted, their forms were disintegrating, vanishing into the ether. "No," I whispered again, barely able to breathe, my legs buckling beneath me. "I can't. I won't." But the story was stronger, and this time it was too late to escape. Everything blurred into white again. And just like that, I was pulled back to the beginning. I awoke with a start, gasping for air as if the breath had been stolen from my lungs. The room was exactly as it had always been, still quiet and too familiar. The bed, the walls, the window, with the faintest streaks of light filtering through. Nothing had changed. But everything felt different. I had been here before. It wasn't just the sense of deja vu that had taken over. It was something deeper, something more profound. The weight of the moment pressed down on me like a physical force, something heavy in my chest, suffocating. This was no longer the world I had tried to escape. This was another page, another cycle. I sat up quickly, my pulse racing. I could feel the pull in the air again. The walls seemed to breathe with me. Was it happening again? No, it couldn't be. Couldn't go back to that world. I couldn't let it swallow me up once more. My thoughts crashed over each other, disjointed, like a storm. The old man's words echoed in my head. The ending has always been written. We're all characters in it. You're just placed somewhere new. Somewhere temporary, it felt like. A trap. I swung my legs off the side of the bed, my feet meeting the cold floor with a soft thud. I didn't even have to look at the clock to know the time. I could feel it. The moment was repeating itself. The moment I had woken up before. The moment everything started to fall apart. I stood up, my body stiff, my head spinning. I needed to move. I needed to get out. The door. I had to reach the door. I walked toward it, each step louder than the last. The sound of my own feet against the floor ringing in the silence. The door seemed miles away. It always did. Every time I reached, For it felt like I was never going to make it. The hallway stretched on forever, and the door, it's always just out of reach. But this time, something was different. Something inside me shifted. I had been here before, yes, but I had also fought my way through it. I had escaped. I knew what I was dealing with now. I knew the rules. I had to stay grounded. I couldn't let the illusion overwhelm me. I reached the door, my hand grasping the cold metal of the knob. But as I turned it, the door didn't open. It wasn't locked, wasn't even stuck. It refused to open. I twisted harder, my breath coming. Faster, my palms slick against the cold brass. Nothing. The door wouldn't budge. Panic began to rise in my chest, clawing at my throat. I wasn't supposed to be here again. I had broken free. I had chosen my own ending. This was impossible. I pulled harder. Then I stopped. Something inside me screamed for me to stop, to think, to remember it's a loop. A loop, it was all. Starting to click into place, the voices, the figures, the way the world bent and twisted, only to reset itself over and over. I wasn't just stuck in a story. I was stuck in a cycle-and endless loop, replaying over and over again. It's like some cruel twist of fate that never let me break free. I could feel it now, the weight of the story. It's like a chain around my chest, pulling me back into its grasp. It didn't matter what I did or how hard I fought. The cycle would repeat itself. The beginning, the middle, the end. Everything always came back to this. And then, just as I thought I might lose it, I heard it. A voice, but not from the outside. It was from within me, from somewhere deep inside, where the truth of everything I had been through was buried. You're not stuck. I froze. The words echoed inside me. It's resonating like a strange kind of clarity. I'm not stuck. The realization hit me like a rush of cold water. This wasn't just some unbreakable loop. This was a test. A test of my will, of my mind, my resolve. I wasn't meant to break free just by escaping. I wasn't supposed to tear down walls or smash mirrors or fight against the flow. I had to. Choose to stop running. I turned back to the room, the walls closing in again, the weight of the story pressing against me. But this time, I didn't feel the fear. I didn't feel the urge to flee. I walked back into the center of the room, my feet heavy against the floor. The voices tried to rise again, but I pushed them down. Images of the other versions of myself flickered at the edges of my mind, but I locked them out. I wasn't going to fight. I wasn't going to try and break free again. I wasn't going to resist. I was going to stay. I closed my eyes, breathing deeply, feeling the weight of everything around me. The pull, the tension, the walls, the whispers, the reflections. It was all part of it, part of the same story. The only way out was to stop fighting, to stop. Trying to control the ending? I didn't need to escape anymore. I didn't need to outrun the story. I became the story. When I opened my eyes, the world had shifted. The door was still there, but it no longer mattered. The room had stopped closing in on me. The edges had softened. I wasn't trapped anymore. Cycle had ended. I had written my own chapter. This time there was no return. I had broken the loop and the world around me. The one I had been running from for so long faded into nothingness. The echo of a life I once knew disappeared. I was finally free. For real. And there was nothing left to do except move forward. Have you ever felt like you're stuck in a cycle you can't break? Do you think the story we live is really ours? Or are we just following someone else's script? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this journey left you questioning reality, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that bend the line between the real and the imagined.